If I were 25 again with no name, no Berkshire, no capital pile already working for me, and someone told me I had 1 year to change the direction of my life, I would not begin by asking what stock to buy. I would begin by asking what kind of machine I could become. That is the first distinction most people never make. They think money comes from opportunities. It does not. Money comes from capacity meeting opportunity. A weak man in a strong market still usually finds a way to stay weak. A scattered man with a good idea still usually finds a way to turn the idea into motion instead of money. A tired man with talent still loses to the less talented man who built a system around his effort. That is why I care so much about structure. The public keeps looking for tactics. I keep looking for engines. And when I read material like the one you gave me, what I see underneath all the noise is not a motivational list. I see a blunt truth. Most people stay poor longer than they should because they never spend 1 full year reorganizing their life around one economic target. They dabble. They hesitate. They spread effort across too many identities. Employee by day, dreamer by night. That is not how financial escape happens. Financial escape usually begins when somebody decides, for one stretch long enough to matter, that almost everything else will have to stand aside. This is not glamorous. It is not balanced. It is not how people talk when they want to sound enlightened. It is how people act when they finally get serious. I have always believed that one of the most underrated forms of wealth is embarrassment tolerance. If you can look clumsy for a year, ignored for a year, under-celebrated for a year, beneath your old image for a year, you can often buy yourself a very different decade. That is not a line people enjoy hearing. They prefer cleaner advice, save steadily, diversify, be patient, all good things. But none of those ideas helps much if your actual earning engine remains too weak to create real surplus. And that is where I would start, not with investing. With the engine, the first thing I would do is declare a single scoreboard, not 15 goals, not a vision board, not a vague resolution about becoming better with money. I would choose one number, because numbers end arguments with yourself more quickly than feelings do. A person can lie to himself inside language. It is much harder to lie inside arithmetic. If the target is $10,000 a month in revenue, income, or controlled cash flow, fine, use that. If it is lower because your circumstances are different, then use the right number for your life. The important part is not the vanity of the number. The important part is that the year is no longer being judged by whether you stayed busy or learned a lot or tried your best. The year is judged by production. People dislike being measured that way. Good. That is one reason it works. Once the scoreboard exists, the next thing I would do is something that sounds almost childish. I would write it down by hand. There is something about writing a hard target by hand that forces the brain to stop treating it as entertainment. A thought can remain a fantasy. A sentence written in a notebook begins becoming a contract. I do not worship notebooks. I do worship seriousness, and seriousness loves visible commitments. Now, once that target exists, the average person wants to move immediately to the market, or to a brand, or to a side hustle idea, or to some complicated channel he barely understands. I would not. I would go backwards first. I would study, not endlessly, not as procrastination wearing respectable clothes, but enough to understand the essential machinery. I have never respected arrogance in beginners. A person can save himself years of stupidity by admitting early that he does not know the fundamentals and then correcting that ignorance aggressively. It is one reason I still like books. A book forces you to stay inside another person's complete argument long enough to absorb a framework rather than just consuming disconnected clips. The public wants entertainment that sounds like education. I want education that survives reality. So yes, If I were beginning again, I would give myself a concentrated curriculum. Not because books make you rich, they do not, but because bad mental models make you poor in ways that are expensive to unwind later. I would want one book that teaches me how intelligent people think about leverage, time, and decision. Making one that teaches me how much effort ordinary people underestimate. One that teaches me the difference between building a business and merely creating myself another job. One that teaches me how to craft offers people actually buy. One that teaches me how habits survive when mood disappears. That is enough. Not a library, a toolkit. Then I would do something most people delay too long. I would make an inventory of my current leverage. When I say leverage, I do not yet mean financial leverage. I mean all the things already sitting in your life that can be turned toward money if used properly. Do you have a laptop, a camera, a phone, editing skill, design taste, sales instincts, writing ability, technical knowledge, a network in a specific industry, an unusual work ethic, a strange obsession that happens to be commercially useful, a tolerance for repetitive practice, a body of knowledge in one niche that other people find confusing? Most people own more raw leverage than they realize. The problem is not total absence. The problem is fragmentation. They have pieces. They do not turn the pieces into a weapon. That is why the inventory matters. You are trying to answer a simple question. Out of all the things I can already touch, what can be converted into money the fastest, if practiced hard enough? This is another place where people go wrong. They pick passion first. I do not disrespect passion. I just think the market respects other things more consistently. I would choose a money skill, a skill close to revenue, a skill businesses pay for weekly, not someday. A skill that does not require 10 years of approval before it can produce sales, copy, paid traffic, editing, design, that affects conversions, appointment setting, system setup, automation. Something the market understands as useful in cash terms. This is not because other skills are worthless. It is because early in the journey you need speed of feedback. You need the market to tell you quickly whether what you are practicing matters. That is one reason I prefer skills close to money. They shorten confusion. And once the skill is chosen, I would stop talking. This is one of the simplest and most profitable behavioral changes available to a beginner. Move in silence until the structure is stronger. The public has a terrible habit of trying to harvest emotional reward before economic reward exists. It announces plans. It asks friends what they think. It gets premature encouragement or premature ridicule. It turns a fragile plan into a social identity before the plan has earned that exposure. That is weak behavior. Not because secrecy is mystical, because beginnings are fragile. A seed does not need applause, it needs protection. And I have noticed something else. Most people around you are not equipped to evaluate an unusual attempt at economic change. They know the current you. They are calibrated to your past. They do not naturally see what you might become. Sometimes they discourage you out of fear, sometimes out of their own limitations, sometimes simply because your movement would force them to confront their own stillness. I do not hate them for that. I just would not ask their permission. A person trying to make his first serious economic leap is often better off talking less and practicing more. Now, after choosing the skill and protecting the beginning, I would change my environment. People underestimate environment because environment is so close to them, they mistake it for weather. Your old environment may be comfortable. That does not mean it is fertile. If nobody around you builds, sells, owns, or thinks in terms of value creation, then you are trying to become financially stronger inside air that does not support that kind of growth that matters. I have always believed proximity changes appetite. Once you get closer to people who know how money is actually made, not how it is fantasized about. You begin seeing the structure differently. You hear different language, you watch different decisions, you notice where value is created, where it is extracted, and who keeps the largest share of it. That is why I would spend part of this year buying proximity, not image, not vibes. Proximity to competence. Go where the people are who solve expensive problems. If money is tight, go where access is cheap or free. Events, workshops, industry meetups, seminars, online communities with real operators instead of motivational tourists. The point is not networking in the shallow sense. The point is recalibration. When you stand near serious people long enough, your standards change. Then comes the most important early move of all. Sell something simple to someone already buying. People lose years trying to design the perfect offer when what they really need is proof. The first, it needs to be real. I would choose one customer type for 90 days, not forever. 90 days long enough to learn, short enough not to become an identity prison. And I would choose a customer who already spends money. Dentists, lawyers, clinics, contractors, creators, real estate teams, local businesses with obvious customer acquisition pain. Anybody with money, urgency, and a measurable problem. Do not sell to broke people if you can avoid it. That is one of the most important lines in business. Broke people consume the most energy per dollar earned. Richer or at least commercially active clients are not morally superior. They simply occupy markets where money already moves. That matters. Then I would build the simplest offer possible. One customer, one result, one timeline, one price, nothing fancy. I help this kind of person get this measurable outcome in this time frame without this obvious pain. That is enough. Not forever. For now, specificity creates speed. I would race to proof. The first goal is not 1,000 customers. It is one stranger paying you. That is the real baptism. Friends and family do not count much here. They may be generous, they may be supportive, they are not proof of market reality. I want a stranger. The stranger owes you nothing. If a stranger pays, the machine has spoken. Now you know that your effort has touched a real market nerve that changes you. It also changes your selling, because now you have the only thing that makes future selling much easier. Evidence one paying customer is infinitely more valuable than 100 positive reactions from people who never intended to buy. This is why I tell beginners to stop treating the first sale as a reward. It is research, and if you have to spend some money, undercharge a little, or endure awkwardness to get that proof, fine, you are not losing, you are buying clarity. Clarity is worth money. Once the proof exists, document it. This is where the machine starts becoming repeatable. What did you promise? What did you do? What result appeared? What screenshot? Testimonial before and after workflow or outcome can be shown. The reason proof matters so much is that buyers are not paying for your effort. They are paying for reduced uncertainty. Every piece of evidence that says I have done this before makes the next sale easier because it lowers fear. Business becomes much easier when proof begins doing part of the talking for you. And now, once you have one sale and one proof point, the game changes again. The bottleneck is no longer skill alone. It becomes distribution. This is where almost every small operator stalls. He learns a useful skill, delivers something real, gets 1 or 2 clients, and then fails to build the channel through which future clients reliably arrive. That is not a small error. It is the whole business. If nobody knows you exist, your skill remains trapped. So I would choose one distribution channel and go hard. 1, not 6, not all platforms. 1 channel for 1 year. Become difficult to ignore inside that lane. Post every day if that is what the lane requires. Outbound every day if that is what the lane requires. Paid ads every day if that is the game you understand. Email every day, content every day, follow-up every day. People keep trying to solve a volume problem with creativity. Often the solution is volume applied consistently inside one channel long enough for compounding attention to begin. The public hates repetition. The market loves it. This is why promotion comes before comfort. Many people want to perfect the back end before they have enough demand to justify any perfection. I understand the instinct. It is safer. It is also slower. In the beginning, demand generation matters more than polish. First, people must know you exist. Then you improve the machine. And once demand exceeds your capacity, a new stage appears. This is the stage where many operators stay busy, but do not become rich. They do more work. They do not build more leverage. The only way through that stage is delegation. Not a giant team, not a dramatic org chart. One person to take part of the repeatable load. This is another place where the average beginner gets romantic. He thinks the first hire should make him feel like a CEO. Nonsense. The first hire should buy back selling time. That is the real goal. If repetitive tasks are stealing the hours you need for demand generation, then those repetitive tasks are too expensive for you to keep owning personally. This is why I would hire for repetition first. The boring work, the consuming work, the documented work, anything that can be turned into a checklist shown by example, and quality controlled without requiring your full brain every time. That is not glamorous. It is leverage. The job of the founder or operator starts shifting here. Less raw delivery, more selling, controlling quality, improving systems, and protecting the economics. And then comes pricing. This is where seriousness finally separates from activity. Most beginners underprice because they are scared. That is understandable at first. It becomes destructive later. If the work is valuable, proven, and repeatable, the next move is not just more volume. It is better packaging. Different tiers, premium options, faster options, outcome-based framing, stronger guarantees where warranted. Adults do not sell random labor forever. They sell clearly defined packages with value attached to them. A business becomes easier to scale when the buyer understands exactly what he is buying and why different prices exist. Ambiguity is expensive. Clarity gets paid. Now let me step back and tell you what is really happening beneath all these moves. You are turning yourself from a laborer into a small machine. That is the real change. The skill was the engine. The proof was the spark. Distribution became the fuel line. Delegation widened the output. Pricing improved the economics. Reinvestment strengthened the machine. That is the sequence. And it only works if you keep the money inside long enough to compound. This is another place people betray themselves. They finally start making some money and immediately begin consuming the evidence of progress. Nicer apartment, better clothes, better trips, a life that says, look, it is working. That is one of the most expensive habits in wealth building. Revenue is not yours just because it passed through your hands. Not yet. In the unstable stage, cash is oxygen. Oxygen belongs in the lungs first. You reinvest hard because money at that stage buys speed, capacity, certainty, and better systems, better tools, better process, better people, better contracts, cleaner legal structure, smoother onboarding, faster delivery, fewer mistakes, all the small things, the amateur delays, and the professional fixes. What looks obsessive at this stage becomes money later, because reliability is monetizable. People pay more when they trust the machine. Now we reach the stage where the operator starts seeing real money around him. This is a dangerous and beautiful stage. Dangerous because ego wakes up. Beautiful because economics become visible. You start noticing how people above you really make money. not from being the hardest worker in the room, from leverage, from ownership, from recurring revenue, from distribution, from relationships, from controlling the interface between value creation and money flow. That is one of the most useful awakenings a person can have. Poor people ask, how do I earn more? Wealthy people ask, where is the value being created, and who owns the right to keep the largest share of it? That question changes careers. It changes negotiations. It changes what businesses you admire and which ones you stop envying. And once you truly see how the money is made, the final step becomes obvious. You stop relying only on the machine you built and start buying ownership in other machines too. This is the stage people think is step one. It is not. This is where investing finally becomes powerful, because now you have surplus large enough to matter and discipline strong enough not to sabotage it. Now the broad market index fund becomes meaningful. Now real estate can matter if the numbers are honest. Now you can let other people's machines work for you while your own machine is still producing. That is the crossing point. Labor and ownership begin overlapping. Then, if you keep going, ownership starts taking more of the burden. That is when wealth becomes real. Not when income first spikes, when ownership begins carrying the future. I have never thought the purpose of money was to make you look successful. I think the purpose of money is to buy freedom. And freedom comes when your life is no longer held up only by your hours. That is what the sequence is really for. Buy time so you can build, buy skill so your hours are worth more. Buy distribution so the market can find you. Build a cash flow machine so surplus becomes predictable. Then buy ownership so the surplus compounds into independence. That is the order. Most people try to start at the end and then wonder why the math feels too small. The math feels too small because they skipped the engine. The engine is the whole game, and if you build it in the right order, you do not need magic. You need patience, discipline, and enough honesty to stop demanding Chapter 10 rewards while you are still living in Chapter 2. That is a very adult thing to understand. The world keeps looking for a shortcut. I keep looking for sequence. Sequence wins more often. Always. There is one final thing I want you to understand, because without it many people sabotage the sequence right when it begins working. The timeline will offend you. That is normal. People hear this order and imagine that if they execute hard for 90 days, the whole thing should start looking visible. Sometimes you will make encouraging progress in 90 days. Good. But the deeper shift usually takes longer than your emotions want and less time than your fear claims. The first months are usually for friction. You are buying back time and discovering how much of your life was quietly being stolen by maintenance. Then comes the skill phase, and that is humbling, because a real market skill does not care what you think your potential is. It cares what result you can produce. Then comes distribution, which is even more humbling because the market does not reward your hidden talent. It rewards visible, trusted usefulness. Then comes the machine phase, where you realize that making money once is not the same as making money predictably. Only after those layers begin cooperating does ownership start feeling like the force people promised it would be. That means you must become emotionally compatible with delayed proof. This is where most people fail, not because they lack intelligence, because they keep asking the process to flatter them before it is mature enough to do so. The beginner asks, when will I look successful? The adult asks, what can I build this month that makes next month stronger? That is a much better question. It is also why I care so much about identity and wealth building. A person who still needs applause every week will struggle to finish any serious economic transformation, because serious transformation has long, silent stretches. In those stretches, there is no crowd, no visible celebration, no tidy confirmation that the sacrifice is wise. There is only the work, the structure, and your own willingness to keep going. That is why I prefer quiet builders to loud dreamers. Quiet builders do not need the world to clap before the foundation is poured. They keep laying brick. Then one day, often much later than outsiders notice, the thing becomes obvious. People call it sudden. It was not sudden. It was compounding in structure. A better hour value compounded into more surplus. Better distribution compounded into more opportunity. A stronger machine compounded into more predictable cash. Ownership compounded into more freedom. That is how these lives are really built. So if you feel behind, stop asking what the fastest visible move is. Ask where the sequence broke. Do you still have no real time? Then buy time first. Do you have time but weak earning power? Then buy skill. Do you have skill but no demand? Then buy distribution. Do you have skill and demand but no repeatable machine? Then build systems and cash flow. Do you have surplus but too little ownership? Then buy the machine. That is how you correct a financial life without pretending to be in a later chapter than you are. And that honesty, more than cleverness, is what usually separates the people who eventually build real wealth from the people who spend years talking as if they are about to. Talk is cheap. Sequence is expensive. That is precisely why it pays.